How's everybody doing? Fabulous. Might I veer a little off course? Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, I would like, because I flap around and all that. And I think I'm loud enough. My father says there's no issue, but if you want me to use the mic, I certainly will. We good? Excellent. So somebody very smart just took down the lights a bit. Can we all see okay? Yes. Looks good? Fabulous. Good, good, good. Let's go. Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you to the Chelmsford Genealogy Club for inviting me. I want to also make sure that I thank the Chelmsford Cultural Council. We applied for a grant to make this program happen during the last round of the Cultural Council's grant period last fall for the 2018 events. We went in, we gave a little talk to the council and said what we were going to do and why we wanted some help with the funding, and they were very gracious in granting our program some of the funding that's been allotted for cultural programming. So, do I have any council members here this evening? I wondered if any of the cultural council members were here this evening, because one of the things was on the application was expect that maybe some of the cultural members, would the cultural council be invited? Well, certainly, if you give me money, you can absolutely come and watch me talk for an hour. No problem. I want them to know that it's happened. I want them to know that we've given them credit, and we thank them very much for funding us this evening. So I will ask two more things and we will get going. If you could all silence your cell phones, that would be fabulous. Should your cell phone ring during a presentation, it becomes mine, and I'm looking for a new iPhone 10. And if I could also ask you to hold your questions till the end of the program, it will not take very long for you to figure out that I can talk about this all day and all night. If you get me off track in the middle of the program, you will all be late to work tomorrow. Truly. I will be very happy to take questions at the end of the program in an open format so everybody can participate. And I will also be happy to talk to you one-on-one should you have any detailed questions afterwards. Please, either if you have not got them already or on your way out, please make sure you grab a piece of propaganda. This is a Gravestone Girls little love letter. It gives you all the information about who we are, what we do, and information on how to reach us again. Through the website, you can shop for our goodies online. You can follow us through Facebook and Instagram. We are always writing about what's going on in the cemetery and gravestone community, not just about us, but also what our other friends and other groups we follow, both here in the United States and internationally, what's happening with our gravestones and cemeteries. The Genealogy Club was also gracious enough to print out a number of handouts. It's a 4-page handout on the back of the table to provide you with. It was created by the Association for Gravestone Studies and the Gravestone Girls. It's 4 pages that's got information about symbols and their meaning, and also some other information about further research tools, further reading. All right, shall we go? Unlocking the Cemetery Gate. This is a program about using the cemetery as a genealogical resource. It is presented by the Gravestone Girls, and it was made possible, supported in part by a grant from the Chelmsford Cultural Council, a local agency, which is supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency. That's the boilerplate. I have to use it. I know it by heart. So, Gravestone Girls, there is indeed an S on the end of that. The Gravestone Girls' mission is to keep our dead alive by preserving cemetery art and history. Shameless self-promotion to the website www.gravestonegirls.com. There are 2 other beloveds that work with me in the background to keep me together and to keep us looking good wherever we go. This is my web mistress, Melissa. Should you follow us on Facebook, she is web mistress Zipporah. That is her gravestone name. And that's Maggie, my best friend for a really long time. I've stopped putting years on it because I don't want you all to know how old I am. So between the 3 of us, we've been at it singularly as Gravestone Girls growing up in central and western Massachusetts, pretty much for most of our lives, and together as Gravestone Girls for almost the last 20 years. Judy gave you a brief overview about what the girls do. I want to just elaborate on that just a little bit. We do public presentations like this. We want to teach you what is here in your town, on your main streets, in your backyards, and not just here in town, but in subsequent towns around the New England area, as well as what cemeteries and gravestones look like on a larger scale nationwide. We lead cemetery tours and do research. We have a good number of people that have found us from other parts of the country that trace their ancestry here, and they've asked us to do work for them. They'll ask us to go out and find plots, clean plots, document them, take pictures, or make replicas, and I will also get to that as something we do. This is something Gravestone Girls do. We teach gravestone rubbing classes. How many of you think gravestone rubbing is illegal in Massachusetts? Raise your hands. I can see you all going, yeah, I thought so. Was it just me? No, there's a huge misconception about gravestone rubbing overall. And one of the biggest things I get when people ask me, when I tell them what I do, that I teach these classes, they say, wait a minute, I thought that was prohibited. I thought you couldn't do that. There is no Mass General law on the books that across the board prohibits gravestone rubbing. It is up to whoever oversees the burial ground to determine what they will and will not allow. That being said, a lot of people have prohibited, though a lot of overseers have prohibited gravestone rubbing because certainly, unfortunately, people have gone in to do these kind of things, to do cleanups or to take a rubbing, and they've caused damage. So that's caused a lot of people to just shut it down completely. And I'm really trying to bust that myth. To do a gravestone rubbing is to create a document of that stone at a particular point in time. We think, well, they're made out of stone, so they're not going anywhere and they're not going to change. But they do. The trees fall on them, biological growth covers their faces and obscures the art, makes them difficult, if not impossible, to read. The lawnmowers throw rocks at them. They're outside 24/7 through all 4 of our New England seasons. 200 years, 300 years. One summer of lawnmowers and weed whackers. When you look at old colonial gravestones, the slate ones that look like this, and you see white striations across the bottom of them horizontally, that's from weed whackers. So don't tell me that gravestone rubbing is a problem. The issue is it needs to be a properly executed gravestone rubbing. It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to get permission before you go out. It's your responsibility to know how to choose the right stone. Make sure that it's a good candidate. It's your responsibility to put a barrier between the stone and your working surface. And it's your responsibility to keep track of your materials and clean up after yourself after you leave. It's not rocket science, but it takes some initiative. And if we can show these overseers of the burial grounds that we are responsible artists, we're responsible creators of these, they're more likely to let us come in and do it. Many times that gravestone rubbing can be all that's left of a stone in the future. So keep that in mind. I learned to rub gravestones when I was a little kid a long time ago. My mother taught me in the family cemetery as a method of keeping me occupied and out of her hair while she and my grandmother took care of the family plot. So years go by, I've got all of these pieces of paper, 2 dimensions, and I wanted more. I had a couple of really nice gravestone friends out there in the cemetery landscape, and I wanted to take them home. And I knew that would be frowned upon. I'm not going to remove them from the cemetery. But I did learn, because I have an art history education and a background in restoration, I was able to develop a process that I could safely take into the cemetery and collect an image and make a copy. And Maggie and I worked on it for a long time to make a couple pieces just for ourselves. So that's where that last thing, gravestone replicas, comes in. We worked on it for a while. We developed a process, then we went out and worked in the field. Made a few pieces for ourselves, gave them to friends, and the joke suddenly became, nothing says Merry Christmas or Happy Birthday like a gravestone. So at the beginning, we were just making copies of little attributes, wings, skulls, and stars, and hourglasses, and that kind of thing. So little by little, we start doing more work. We start doing some arts and crafts shows. Melissa comes along, builds the website, and now, 20 years later, we've got a collection of almost 200 pieces that we offer through the website, and as well as something extra special. Because of the beauty and the power of the internet, I got an email one day with this picture attached. And the gentleman says, I'm in Ohio. This is my 7th great-grandfather's gravestone in in Concord, Massachusetts. And I was just trolling the internet trying to figure out how to make a replica of that, because this is the family coat of arms. And I just stumbled across the Gravestone Girls, and since you ladies are already in Massachusetts, since you already know how to do this, might I hire you to make a replica for me? I am a good capitalist and entrepreneur. I said, absolutely, we'd be happy to do this work for you. So we went about the process of getting permission from the town of Concord that oversees that burial ground. And we went in on a beautiful day a really long time ago. And this is Maggie doing the work. And what we do is we take an impression from the face of the stone to capture the art and then get it home and replicate it. I will teach you how to do this. Rub gravestones. I'll teach you how to do that all day long. No problem. I will not teach you how to do castings. Don't ask me. I don't need the competition. And really, you know that thing, I'm a professional, don't try it at home? That's true. Know that anytime you lay anything on the face of a gravestone, regardless of what its material is, what it's made out of geologically, anything you put on the face of the gravestone is going to leave something behind. You need to know the kind of materials you're working with, and you need to know how to neutralize them to make them inert by the time you're done, so that you leave nothing behind. We may put things on the faces of stones to clean them or to make them easier to read and think, oh yeah, I'm just going to rinse this off, no problem. I can't see it anymore, it must be gone. It's not true. You really need to know what you're looking at, what you're working with, and how to compensate for that use once you've completed the job. That being said, I get asked a lot about cleaning gravestones. Again, not rocket science. Most people really overthink it. There's information on the Gravestone Girls website in our Learn section where we've posted some documentation from the Parks Department, the National Center for Preservation, Trust, and Technology, that it's governmental guidelines about cleaning gravestones. So that's a great resource for you to go to. Really, all you need to do to clean gravestones is water. A lot of water. Some soft brushes and some elbow grease. But you also need to know what you're working with before you get anything started. So, no detergents. I don't want to hear about white wall materials so you can read it. I don't want to hear about chocolate pudding put on the faces so that you can hear it. Yeah, somebody once told me that when she couldn't read the white gravestones, she put chocolate pudding on the face of it. Right, okay. So I screamed, because it was in an open Q&A after a program. I screamed, I couldn't help it. And her logic was good. It was flawed, but it was good. She said, well, chocolate pudding, humans can eat that, so it can't be bad, right? And when I'm done, I just leave it, and the deer will come along and they'll lick it off the gravestones. I can't make this stuff up, honest to God. So when I calmed down and caught my breath, we walked through it, and they said, those stones are made out of a similar material to your teeth and bones. What happens when you eat a whole bowl full of chocolate pudding and never brush your teeth again? Decays, right? It's exactly what was going to happen with those gravestones. So you really need to know what you're doing before you touch any of these objects, really for any reason. Let me give you some perspective here. This is a big stone. That centerpiece, that coat of arms itself, is about 19 inches in diameter. This is Maggie doing the work. She's about 5'10". I'd say she's close to 6 feet tall with all that hair piled on her head. Look how tall that stone is. So know that when you see these colonial slate stones in the ground, there's another 1 to 2/3 more material underground. So if this is 6 feet tall above ground and we pull it up, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 feet long. take one step back beyond that and think about somebody had to go quarry that piece of rock. So they would have taken something out of the earth that was even wider and longer to be able to get it down to the finished shape and size that you see. I am going to tell you a lot of things tonight. First thing I'm going to do is tell you the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery, because there is a difference. It has to do with time period. The landscape, looking across the landscape, a visual cue of looking at these graveyards and cemeteries when you come in contact with them will give you a clue to the time frame and the social period. For graveyard, the burying ground, old burial point, the burying place, all of those kind of terms are for early burial grounds. They're for early cemeteries. We don't use cemetery until 1831. We use those terms in the colonial period from first settlement through the 1700s. When you come into town, any town, almost any, never say never, but almost any town in the New England area, if you're looking for this old style colonial burial ground, and you're looking for the old places where the original people are buried, look for Main Street, look for the historic district, look for something that would be the original center of town. Many of our New England towns still are in the original center where they were first established. Centers do change over time, though, as well. You may start out with a town that centers itself over here, and then for whatever reason, and there are many, they pick up and they move over here. So keep that in mind, but this is a good way to just kind of get a feel for the landscape. If you can't find the burial ground on Main Street, if there is no historic district, try something else. Look up in the sky. Look for those white steeples. Those New England churches that are so beautiful on our landscapes in so many of our towns are very often on the sites of the original meeting houses. Or look for City Hall. City Hall often crops up on the foundations of the original meeting houses. And the two are almost, in many cases, were almost put in simultaneously, either one just before the other or just after, but very contemporaneous to each other. When you see these old spaces, these colonial burial grounds, know what you're looking at has absolutely changed over time. We find that really hard to believe in the 21st century, that such sacred spaces could actually change. But think about the span of time. If you are someplace where these spaces usually are in the centers of town or in busy areas, they're some of the first things to get put in, and as town grows, they're some of the first things to give up their material space. So we might put in roads that didn't exist before. We may widen roads that are already there. We build buildings. We put in trolley tracks. We do things for modern progress that impact these spaces. Landscaping, ease of groundskeeping changes these spaces. People come in at different times and for different aesthetic reasons decide to change these places around. When we understand about sanitary conditions later on in the 1800s and into the early 1900s, we're moving these guys out in many cases. I live in Worcester, and one of my colonial burial grounds is located in the middle of town, behind City Hall, that used to be the original meeting house, and in 1848 was all put down and covered over to make way for the trolley tracks. It was called progress. The idea of historic preservation as we embrace it today is really only about 50 years old on the broad scale of the way we embrace it today. Fortunately, that burial ground that was put under in Worcester, they did take a transcription of it. So there is a document of what went down, and every time the city goes in to do any kind of infrastructure maintenance, lay fiber optic cable, do anything like that, they're always running into gravestones. This comes next. This is round two. This is a cemetery. This is called the rural or the garden cemetery movement of the 19th century. It's very much in keeping with the changes from moving from an agrarian culture to being an industrialized nation. Green grass, rolling hills, beautiful plantings. The monuments are all different shapes and sizes and materials. This is very much in keeping with that 19th century Victorian style. The first cemetery was Mount Auburn in Cambridge, founded in 1831 by the Mass Horticultural Society. It was originally about 75 acres. It's now about 175 acres. And not only was it first made to be a burying place, it was created to be an arboretum as well, as it is today. When Mount Auburn was established, because it was new, because it was very different, part of the reason it changed, in addition that it changed to being the way it was influenced by places like Père Lachaise in the cemetery in Paris. A movement for getting out and enjoying nature and preserving nature. You've got Hawthorne and Thoreau and all those guys writing about communing with nature. They see themselves as the modern people of the time. And they look back at those colonial burial grounds and they say, no, 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 that is not who we are. We want to change everything about who we are. We have changed everything about who we are in the land of the living, so we're going to change everything about who we are in the land of the dead as well. These are social places. They are places where you had picnics. These are the places where you visited. This was open green space that was very much enjoyed by the people. This is wave number 3. Looks really different, doesn't it? This is also a cemetery. And I want you to know a little tidbit. The word cemetery comes from a Greek word that means sleeping place or dormitory. So even the name, changing the name from a burial ground to a cemetery, reflects a belief system that says no more rotting in the ground and being eaten by worms, going moldering to clay, all those things that you'll read on those colonial stones. You pass away, you fall asleep, you go to the summerland. It's a much more pleasant, modern transition for the time. And we carry on that idea with our cemeteries in the 20th and the 21st century. Everything here is different again. As we come out of the 1800s and into the 1900s, there's a backlash against all the high sentimentality, the over-ornamentation, the very busyness of everything that marked the Victorian era. There's an arts and crafts movement that makes its way from England over to the United States, and we want to simplify. So in the land of the living, we simplify our architecture and our furniture to a more simple arts and crafts style. Women are cutting their hair. They're taking off the corsets and the bustles, and hemlines are coming up. Men are shaving those big beards that they've been cultivating for the last 30 years of the 19th century. So everything that happens in the land of the living, we want to change this space too. We change our cemeteries to be more pastoral. We want them to be easier on the eye, not so busy like the Victorians. We also have the access to new stone material as well. These are granites. So the predominant material in the colonial period in our area was slate. Then we moved to marbles in the 19th century. And in the 20th and 21st century, we've moved to granite. Because we have easy access to it, as well as modern tools of the time to work this very hard rock, not just for big important buildings and other large fancy projects, but also for something as simple or as humble as a gravestone. So you use the cemetery to journey through time. You use it to find information on the past and the present. You walk through those gates, and it's just like a time machine. And it will show you all kinds of things that happen in the land of the living. You get direct and indirect information available on the tombstones. It's what you can read that's written right on the face, as well as what you can deduce by doing math, by comparing one stone to another, by looking at one plot against another, and really also on a larger scale looking across the whole cemetery. The information that you find when you go into these old graveyards and these cemeteries reveals a picture of not just that individual, not just that person that that gravestone is for. It will also give you a picture of the family, as well as on a much broader scale, society at any point in time. What society is thinking and feeling about mortality, about morality, about memorialization is spoken very loudly through the gravestones itself, as well as the landscapes of the cemeteries. The direct information that you can get right off the faces of these. And this is only but a short list. Identities, names, ages, genders, relations, wife of so-and-so, brother, sister, daughter. Marriages and adoptions, first wife, second wife, third wife. Adopted children, only children. In the marriage things, it's always very interesting, and I love talking to a group of genealogists because you guys really get this. In the marriage part of it, I like the idea that when a woman married, particularly up through the 19th century, if she lost her husband, she didn't necessarily have to marry again, right? Her obligation was sort of done, society-wise. Usually she would marry again for companionship, but also out of necessity to keep the homestead running. You guys, you're all dangerous till you're dead. So you marry, and you lose one, and you marry another one, and another one, and another one, and we'll get to that. Our gravestones will show what we did with ourselves. Personal achievements, professional achievements, where we went to school, the kind of work that we did. It will show our military service, right down to branches and often decoration and achievements within the services. Hobbies and interests. We had free time. What did we do with it? Fraternal and social affiliations, the things that we did outside of our families in different fraternal groups or different societal organizations, not just for the good of our family, but for the good of our community. Places of origin, places of death really will show, written on the faces of the stone, will show you how people moved. Where they might have been born, where they died, and where they might have traveled in between. My favorite is the last one. I know how that sounds. Method of death. Many times it'll be written right on the face of the stone to show what happened to somebody. Not necessarily to say, look at this bad thing that happened to me. More to say, I got up this morning and I thought I was going to have a normal day, and look what happened to me. In the cases of accidents, it will also tell you about diseases. It will tell you about murders. It will tell you about poisonings. It will tell you about being lost at sea. You can get a lot of good stories right from the faces of the stones. There's also deductive information that you can get from the faces of the stones. The things that you can do the math on, so to speak. You can identify family ties and familial associations. Who's married to who? How many times did they get married? How many marriages and resulting children? I like to do the math when I've got multiple wives and see how the wives got younger as the husbands got older. Which is that age gaps between husbands and wives. There's a lot of math that you can do. Identifying patterns of disease outbreaks. Illnesses that go through a community that can be very devastating. It might not even be on that big of a scale. It might be on a small scale within a family. You might have some kind of tragedy where you have a number of losses that might spur you to go on and try and find out what caused that. The second part of that is also the family tragedies, and we're going to look at a couple of those that the stones will document, either directly or indirectly, these kind of tragedies that happen as part of everyday life. And you can also do some other math, as it were, about movement, points of origin in travel. So it doesn't necessarily have to say, I was born in Ireland and I died in Chelmsford, but you might be able to piece together from a name or from travel or from the people around them, surnames in particular. You may be able to figure out where did they come from, what are they doing here, how did they end up here. Or all of these things at least give you a clue that you can find in the cemetery that you can then take back with you to do more exploratory work. I'm going to go on and talk about each one of those topics that we just covered, but there's going to be both things that we in that deductive list as well as the direct information list. They're always going to overlap. So identities and familial ties, you can walk right into a 19th century burial ground and find a family plot. In the 19th century in the cemeteries, you had the first time opportunity to actually purchase a section of land, your family plot, your foundation, your second home, your home away from home, as it were, where the family went one by one and got brought back together from the land of the living to the land of the dead. And looking across that landscape, very often it doesn't take much to figure out where I've got clusters of families. You can also read those burial grounds, particularly, you can read those burial grounds to show different periods on the landscape. So it's very common that your colonial burial ground got expanded to include your 19th century folks, or your 19th century burial ground, your cemetery got expanded to include your modern interments as well. So you can come to the cemetery gate and say, well, I'm looking for somebody from some 1716. Well, you're not going to go to where the granites are. You're not going to go to where the marbles are if you've got slates on the field. And if you've got slates with rounded shoulders, those are the older ones. If you've got slates with square shoulders, those are more from the 19th century. So you start to learn materials and shapes and sizes that will help you whittle down your starting point when you're coming into a place that has a lot of content to choose from. Sometimes they make it really easy. Sometimes we find heraldry. So I now know that what the family coat of arms is. If I'd never seen it before, sometimes it's revealed to me for the first time on a gravestone. If I saw all this pretty art on a slate gravestone, I might not know what it is, but these guys have helped me out because it says coat of arms. They're helpful like that. Sometimes I go into the cemeteries and I'll find a colonial stone and it'll say, this was the first interment in this burial ground. Well, thank you, that's very helpful. I can get visual identifications as well. I get pictures on gravestones, and I get them in all sorts of different ways. I might get a bronze bas-relief like this. I can feel pretty confident that that is that man. You know, that is the guy that's in that grave. I can also gather that he had some dough because you got to have some money to have something like that created. Or maybe a family member comes along later and has them put up posthumously for an ancestor. But these could easily be created from paintings and photographs. Remember, photography is invented in 1839. Becomes widely available to the masses by the middle to late, particularly to the late 19th century. So you can have it sculpted, you can have it cast in bronze, and you can put it on your stone. And those pictures, no matter how new or how old they are, will give you a clue to a time frame. Do you guys know Maureen Taylor? Have you ever seen her? The photo detective? She's awesome. I want to be her when I grow up. She's a great person to learn from to reinforce the idea that when you look at any of these pictures on stones, no matter how new or how old they are, by what they're wearing, you know, check out his chops. There's a particular period where men wore those big sideburns, and you can start to narrow it down. The width of collars, the number of buttons, the types of hat, the tilts of the hat. Looks like she's got maybe not. It looks like she's got some sort of fur collar on the jacket. I can put a date on this. I can narrow it down a lot, just not by the face, but by what they're wearing as well. You can do some of that deductive reasoning. This is called a photoceramic because it's a picture placed on a piece of ceramic and then sealed up so that it's weatherproof and can be attached to or embedded in, like this is, into the gravestone. I can't tell you where I took that picture. I've seen a lot of these, but just going by the way she looks, I put her maybe in the 40s, 1940s. This over here, this lovely couple, is called an etching. So it is either done by laser or done by very talented, very patient people that etch the image based on a photograph, because this is modern. We'll put the picture on the stone. And with the rise of popularity of the black granite material for gravestones, I see a lot of this. I see a lot of these etchings, simply because they just show up very, very well. We may think it's weird to put photos on gravestones. When you're going through the cemetery, watch for old photographs, or old stones that would have had photographs is probably a better way to go. That beautiful orange hand right there, she's such a hand model. That's Melissa. What she's doing, so this black thing here is actually a marble stone. They turn that way because they're very porous and they absorb the pollutants in the atmosphere. They grow black lichens, and they also decay and create a soluble salt that makes that black crust. So when you see what this is, when you see something like this on the face of the stone, you got to go look, because it's got something for you. This happens to be hiding this little niche back here. That stone dates to, I think the death date on that it's absolutely the last quarter. It's like 1872 or something like that. There was a photo in there at one time, and that piece of marble on the little swivel there protected and covered that photo. So once upon a time, there was a photo in there. There was a little piece, there should have been a piece of glass over it to seal up the niche, and then you had this marble cover over it that you can see just swings back and forth with the touch of your hand. It's also preserved the stone by keeping it safe from the elements. And many times, by the size and shape of that niche, you can do some deductive reasoning that will tell you what size plate it was that the picture was put to. And that size plate is often a giveaway to the time period for the type of photography, whether it's daguerreotype, an ambrotype, or a tin type. Marriages, births, and adoptions. So this is one of those etched stones that I just talked about. This is when, I can't tell you where I took this picture either. I know it was in Pennsylvania, but that's as close as I can get. I'll bet it was 20 years ago. And one of the ways you can tell that I took this a long time ago is because this gravestone girl had yet to figure out how to photograph these things without actually being in the picture. So that is the flash of my camera. And that's me. I got a pair of jeans on. It looks like I'm wearing an orange shirt. Oh, then I'm not as old as I think I am. See, there's that deductive reasoning, right? She just did the math and went, you don't know what you're talking about, woman. It wasn't even 20 years ago. So, and that's the whole point of this, right? So I don't know these people. I don't know whether I say Valesky or Valesky, but I know that they were religious or spiritual. I know they had a dog. I know they had 3 lazy cats, as if cats come in any other variety. And I can do a lot of math here, and I can learn something. I can learn how old Alfred and Roberta were when they got married on April 22nd, 1972. I can do the math and see who was older, who was younger, how many years in between. I can do the math and figure out how old Alfred was when he died in 2001. And as of the taking of the photo, I might even be able to reason that Roberta was still with us. That's a lot for just standing there for just a couple of minutes. For people that I existed contemporaneously with, because I was actually alive in 2001 when Alfred left. I was also alive when they got married in 1972. People I existed on this planet with at the same time but never had an opportunity to meet. They've left me something so I can see who they were. This is another idea of the family plot. I've got a husband here. I've got a first wife here. I got a second wife over here. And I got the third wife in the middle. So I like to tell myself a funny story about that one. So I can do the math. How old was he when he first married the first one? How old was he when the second one died? How old was he when the third one died? Did he marry a sister? Did he marry within the family? Did he marry outside of the family? All those kind of things I can find from the faces of the stones. He's a pretty busy guy, right? But normal for them to continue to marry over and over, even in the 19th century. And this apparently is what he was thinking about when he left. This is on the top of that gravestone, on the top of the husband's stone. And it says, there is rest in heaven. You think so, huh? You're going to spend eternity with these three ladies down here. Okay, hopefully all those women don't meet in the next world. They can give me relationships, right? This is one of my favorite things. Right out there for everybody to see. Only child of Mr. William and Mrs. Susanna. I know when she died. I know how old. I've got, I was just going to say a whole bunch more about this. Of course, right then and there when that marker was put up, it was the only child. You don't know if necessarily they didn't move somewhere and have more or have more afterwards. But also, given that nope, that is a slate stone. Given that that's a slate stone, 1829, we're still using slate. Looking at the decoration at the top as well might also help tell you if that stone is contemporary with a death date. Remember, you don't always get a stone when you die. You don't always get a stone 5 years after you die. You might not get a stone 30 years after you die. You might get some modern ancestor may come along and go, I don't want that dark stone for my seventh great-grandfather, and put up a new modern stone. So keep that in mind. This stone says Miss Judith Nurse, daughter of Mr. John Nurse, and an adopted daughter of Mr. Solomon Barnes and Judith, his wife, who died August 7th, AD 1797, in the 19th year of her age. I've got a tremendous amount of information here, don't I, genealogists? Right? I've got Miss Judith. She didn't marry, safe to say. She is the daughter of Mr. John Nurse. Well, where's Mrs. John Nurse? And an adopted daughter of Mr. Solomon Barnes and Judith, his wife. So something happened to Mother Nurse, something may have happened to Father John that left Miss Judith with Solomon Barnes and Judith, his wife. I don't know what, but at some point they took over and they adopted her. There is something that you can I think you can correlate here in that Miss Judith and Judith Barnes. So perhaps this Judith is the mother that was married to John, and she remarried Solomon, and Solomon adopted, right? There's a lot you can do with that. Miss Sally, daughter of, never married. And the women were always something at this time frame, right? Daughter of, sister of, mother of, second wife of, relict of Mrs. Catherine Bacon, relict of Major Ebenezer Bacon, and formerly widow of Captain Jabez Gay. She did pretty well for herself, no? First, I married the captain, and then he died. I was his widow. Then I married a major, and he died, and I became the relict. You guys know consort and relict? No. So I've got a little nomicon for remembering them. they're terms that describe a woman that either died before her husband or after her husband. So consort, I don't have a consort up here. Consort, C-O-N-S-O-R-T, is the idea that she died, she predeceased her husband. Relict, if you took the T off the end of that, you have relic, right? So it's what's left. Another word for widow means she died after the husband. The way I keep them straight is alphabetically. Consort comes before relict. So consort, she died first. Relict, she died after. Because all the time talking about this stuff over the years, I still have to do that little thing in my head. Mrs. Elizabeth Colt over here, relict of Thomas Cole. Do I have a problem right there? Right? So is she a Colt? Is she a Cole? Is that a typo? What is that? So that's going to give you something to chew on. Relict of Thomas Cole of Boston, died January 13th, 1813 AD. This AET is a Latin abbreviation for aetatis. Aged, it means aged. 102. Right, okay, genealogists, how many of you buy that? Right? Totally possible, right? How likely do you think that is? She one lucky woman if she did. And I'm not saying, and I can't prove it one way or another. I'm not going to go do the work because I probably wouldn't even be able to find her between Cole and Colt because I'm a crappy genealogist. I'll just tell you all the cues, all the clues. You guys are much more dedicated and patient than I. So if she died in 1813 at 102, she was born in 1711. Now, as genealogists, you all know how reliable record keeping was in the 18th century, right? So you don't always get a birth certificate when you're born. You don't always get a death certificate when you die. A lot of people go through life not even knowing how old they are. You've got changes in calendars that causes dates to be thrown off. You've got all sorts of, you've got family lore can contribute to this. A death of 1813, like I talked about with that other stone, and I was curious about the style of the stone. So 1813, I can still have a slate, no problem. I've got square shoulders and I've got this urn up here. It's possible that's a contemporary style for the 18 teens. I feel like it might be a bit older, so I might have a family member that put this up. You know, a contemporary, a firm 19th century family member banking on the lore. You know what? She lived to be 102. So all of those things play a role in that. And somebody do me a favor and go find her and tell me if she was really 102. Yeah, right. You don't know if this is a typo because they happen all the time. Yeah, so you don't know. There's a lot to chew on there. Achievements, things people did with themselves in their lives. Yeah, so I wanted to be an archaeologist growing up, so anytime I get into the cemetery when there's anything Egyptian revival, you better believe I'm running for it. And I ran for this one, and I had quite the find, right? So this is Henry Berg. He was the founder of the Association for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Hence all the lovey-dovey animals here in the front. After he started saving the animals, he also made the movement for the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. So I did big things. I got a big monument. Did big things. When you go into the cemeteries, if your ancestors were poor Irish coming over in Third Passage, don't go to the top of the hill of the cemetery unless they made something out of themselves while they were here. The higher up in the cemetery you go, it's the same thing as society. The higher you may have been in society, the bigger your monument, the more money you've got. Here lies the body of His Excellency William Eustace, who was born at Cambridge. So I know where he was born. I know when he was born, June 10th, 1753. I know he died in Boston, February 6th, 1825. And he was rather accomplished, yeah? He was a physician, a member of the National Congress, the governor of Massachusetts from 1823 to 1825. I've got a tremendous amount of information to look at, not just from a biographical point of view, but from an achievement point of view. I can go back and look at business listings for physicians and perhaps find him and get addresses and the type of practice he may have been in. I can look at the congressional records. I can look at the government records and find out about his political party and status in the Congress. And certainly, I bet they wrote about him if he was the governor of Massachusetts from 1823 to 1825. And sometimes you don't have to be this great, big, important person doing great, big things for the country. Sometimes all you really may want to be remembered as is a grandpa and his loving granddaughter. Certainly, I'm going to go with, we still had some money here. But what a beautiful sentiment, right? A very personal, intimate relationship. Gravestones will tell you about education. This is another photo ceramic. FHS. Well, I'm going to go with HS stands for high school. Am I in an F town? Am I in Framingham? Am I in Franklin? Am I in Farmington, New York? Where am I? Can I pull that together right there while I'm standing in the cemetery looking at that picture? I'm also pretty certain that that's a high school picture because that sure looks like a megaphone, right? And she certainly looks like she's in cheerleader or pep rally uniform. That might be her high school picture. So find the F in here, find the high school, and look for the yearbook. Gravestones will often tell you about education, too, where someone went to school, particularly in their achievements. This one is for a minister in Wakefield. And I don't have to even read it, even though it says in there that he went to Harvard Divinity School. They're not pictures of him, but they are certainly the idea that he's part of the clergy. And the clergy, particularly in the 18th, and the 19th century as well, would get often get elaborate stones like this. Very busy, lots of information written on them. And it wasn't to say, look how great I was. It was to say, I was a minister, I was a pastor, I was a reverend. And if there's somebody that's supposed to help you get through this world and get to the next, this guy is the eyes and ears. He is the mouthpiece and the connection between you and your maker, and help guide you through this world, doing the mortality and morality work to get to the other side. Gravestones will also tell me occupations. I've got another member of the clergy here, and it says who he was, how long he served, and where. Pastor of the Second Church of Danvers. Well, that's fabulous. This gravestone's in Peabody. Okay, so where did Peabody come from? Okay, look back. Peabody established in 1855 from Danvers. One step further back, Danvers established 1752 from Salem. I've got a death date of 1792 and 34th year of ministry. So I can do the math and figure out when Danvers was established from Salem and how long he served as the second pastor, from what date to what date. You will often find these portrait stones. I prefer to call them cameos, but they're called portrait stones. But they're not called portrait stones because they look like the person. They are just the idea of a picture. The idea of being human, in this case, the idea of being a member of the clergy, like that other stone we saw where he's got the ecclesiastical collar and robes. That is not the face of the guy in that grave. This is in Greenwood Cemetery in New York. in Brooklyn. Look, I actually remember where I took the picture. Dr. Susan S. McKinney Stewart, 1846-1918, illustrious through faith as wife, mother, and physician. You'll notice that wife and mother comes first, even though they've put her title up there as doctor. And the thing that got my attention that caused me to photograph the stone was because it said doctor. I've got a female doctor at the close of the 19th century. I've got an educated woman that's a practicing physician. Rather uncommon, not unheard of, but certainly a smaller percentage for the females than it was for the men. So I did what any good, curious Gravestone Girl genealogist would do. We've got this tremendous tool called the internet, right? You can start there and it'll lead you to all kinds of resources. So I Googled her. And not only was I amazed at the fact that she was a doctor, look at this. This is what came back. The first African-American woman physician in New York State and the third in the United States. She was graduated valedictorian in her class of 1870 from the New York Medical College for Women and practiced medicine in Brooklyn and Manhattan from 1870 to 1895. That commentary about her life's achievements goes on for another half a page. You never know what you're going to find out there, and then you certainly never know what the possibilities of finding information are when you come and you plug it in your magic oracle. Some people want to talk about what business they were in. Apparently Ricky owned RD Engineering, specializing in regrinding and microprocessing. He was the president and he was in Chicago, Illinois. See how much I like my job? You never know what you're going to see. I know what he looks like. And I can tell you that this stone is not in Chicago. This stone is in New Jersey. So I did the same thing. I had such success with the doctor, I Googled Ricky. Ricky didn't seem to be as notable as the doctor. I would be remiss as a Gravestone Girl if I didn't include this. When you're looking particularly at the slate gravestones, and again of the 19th century marbles as well, look down. Look at the art, look at the shapes, read the words, do the math, all that kind of stuff, but don't forget to look towards the bottom of the stones and the back sides of the stones. You might find a signature like this. This says, engraved by Israel Reed, Worcester. You all familiar with this funny looking thing? It's an S. It is, it's an Old English style S. Often it has a little crossbar on it, so it looks like an F. So it doesn't make any sense to us in the 21st century if we read it out loud. So if you read it out loud and it doesn't make any sense, try changing the letter. As well as this here. This is an S and the T. See how they're cut together? It's called a ligature. It makes it a little easier and a little faster for the cutter to go on. He doesn't have to stop making the S and then move over making the T. He just rolls them right together. Military service. Can't believe how I struggled with this one. So once I got on, as I built this program a while ago, I keep tweaking it and I find new things I want to add, and then I go, well, I don't know anything about this, so let's go ask the Magic Oracle. I know a bunch of things. I know he's William McIntyre. The M, the C is up there, and then I-N-T-I-E-R. For good spelling or for bad, who knows. Esquire, so landowner or wealthy. Major, under General Pepperell, at the reduction of Cape Breton, A.D. 1744. I had no idea what the reduction of Cape Breton was. And really, why would I? So I went and asked the Oracle. And all of a sudden, I learned a whole bunch of stuff about the Third French and Indian War, called King George's War. This reduction is a little, I wasn't able to find, like a lot of times you can Google a battle and start finding resources to read further from there. There is no such incident that I could quickly find under the reduction of Cape Breton in 1744. There was a conflict in St. Louisburg, which is the Nova Scotia area, where we basically got our butts kicked. And that might be what this reduction is. There was a discussion about some trimming down of the troops after a number of unsuccessful conflicts. This tablet is for Francis Washburn, Brevet Brigadier General. I learned something else. Brevet Brigadier General is being given another title makes you brevet. They put that ahead. So he was a colonel of the 4th Regiment Mass Cavalry, but he'd also been given a promotion. Brevets are typically given by the president that elevates your status within the military, but not conferred to you by the military. It was conferred by the president, who is the commander-in-chief. So he held these two positions. I also read that every once in a while they might take a private and make him a brevet commander of some type. Died April 22nd, April 1865, so I know he's a Civil War. Of wounds received at High Bridge, Virginia, 6th April 1865, aged 26 years. Well, I know that he was injured on the 6th and hung around until the 22nd. So where was he? Well, I can find out where the Battle of High Bridge, Virginia was, and then you can start working through there, through the National Park Service, through the, it was a really good one I found today. Yeah, wow. I'll get back to you on that. It was a good military one. Oh, it was the National Archives. The National Archives pointed me in a lot of these directions. So if I know where the battle is, and I know he was wounded, I can then start digging and find out, well, where would he have gone to the hospital? Where might he have been transported after that? And that starts sending you to different resources to start looking for the individual himself. And sometimes I get a picture of military dress, medals, and possibly even faces that tell me something about the individual that served, but that uniform, just like the photos that we saw, the uniform and the medals will tell me the branch of army and maybe even as far as he might have gone. Hobbies and interests. We want to talk about ourselves, particularly in the 21st century. We want to say who we were, what we enjoyed. We want our families that may put these stones up for us want to say who we were as individuals and the things that we enjoyed. I've got a bench here. Come sit with me. Come sit in the sunshine. Come enjoy. Come listen to your music. Come listen to the music of that you might have brought with you, or the music that's just part of being outside in the sun. And I've got a young man here who clearly played guitar. And I've got a quotation here that says, "Let your soul shine." Guess who I asked to find out what that was? Google. In 0.0005 seconds, it returned to me that this is a line of a song from the Allman Brothers. So now all of a sudden I've got a little bit of insight about the kind of music the kid liked to play. Would you really have expected that? No, not really. In a 2014 death, he's playing Allman Brothers. Not impossible, because they're not all actually still alive. I think there's maybe one, but their music is carried on for so long and influenced many generations. This guy apparently was spending eternity fishing. Now, he might have done this for pleasure. Maybe this is a boat for hire that he went out, because that's a pretty specific fish, right? Now, I know it's perspective and it's just a gravestone and stuff, but that looks like a tiny boat for that big old fish. But it gives you things to think about an individual and the things that we like to do. This guy liked to go fast, right? Planes go fast. That car is moving even though it's sitting still. Maybe he was a pilot. Maybe he traveled. Every time I see this picture, I forget that I have not checked yet, but I think I recognize that emblem on the tail. No, I think it was, I just saw it someplace else in a movie. Did anybody see The Post? The new movie, The Post? You know, when they're... Lufthansa? Possibly. Could be. It reminded me of Eastern Airlines when I saw it when they're on the plane early on in the movie in The Post. It's that funny kind of L shape. But see, it gets you thinking, it gets you talking. I got a sports fan. I got a Red Sox fan right there. Die hard, right? If you put it on your gravestone, you're a serious fan. Likewise, these are just the flowers at the grave. If somebody sends you flowers at your funeral in a royal straight flush, you played good poker. I was praying that this was a bingo card, but it's not. It's a calendar. It says April here and the date and the days. Yeah. And there's one missing. See how the 15 is missing? So we can kind of go with that and say that was probably the death date because they left to go play cards. We want to talk about our fraternal associations, what we did for the community. And you can find these all over gravestones from every period. I've got the Daughters of the Confederacy up here, the Knights of Columbus here, the Order of the Elks. Certainly we recognize this as the Freemasons. Look at all the extra stuff on here. I got a ladder, I've got the tools, I've got some crossbones, I've got a moon over here. That was a terrific stone. We've got DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution. So I've got my Daughters of the Revolution and the Confederacy that I see. This is the Ladies Auxiliary, the Order of the Eastern Star, the Ladies Auxiliary for the Freemasons. That I keep trying to remember what fatal means. It means forever. Oh, damn it. And you know how many times I practiced that today? Because it's just one of those things. I've got to find a moniker. Well, that is a moniker for it. I was going to say, like my consort and relic. Faithful, always, truly, something, something. Damn it, somebody help me. Come on, a room full of genealogists. No? Good. Good. It's something, something, always lovely. It's pretty grand is what it is. I just like that they very clearly, they made a point of putting fatal in there. Anyway, we've got the Grange here, the patrons of husbandry. So we've got our agriculturalists, and these are certainly by no means all of them, but you'll find them all over the place. Movement and travel. Here's one from my genealogists, right? Buried in Arlington. So what this is up here, here's Leonard Wood. His wife, Mary Thorning Wood, she's buried in Arlington. This stone is in Concord. So he's there, she's not, but other children of William and Eunice Thorning are buried here, and there's 4 of them. So for whatever reason, the husband's buried with the rest of the kids, and Mary is mentioned here on the stone, but she's not physically there. She's in a cemetery in Arlington, Massachusetts, I'm assuming. When you have a stone like this with a name of someone, but you have no interment, it is called a cenotaph, C-E-N-O-T-A-P-H. So it's a way of having a memorial and remembering someone, even though I don't have an interment. I have no body. This is another cenotaph. This is down in Plymouth, and it talks about Richard Holmes, the son of William and Hannah Holmes, who was drowned in the Pacific Ocean near the port of Lima. That would be Peru. On the 1st of June, 1828, age 22 years. As brothers, we adapt these lines in testimony of respect for those manly virtues. Manly man, right? Lost at sea, big deal. This stone is saying that the brothers put this stone up to remember him, Because I'm pretty sure if you go overboard off the coast of Peru in the 19th century, they didn't find you. But we want to remember you. And it shows that people were moving. You know, this is Plymouth. They lived on the coast. They made their lives on the sea, whether they were fishermen or merchants or any of the other jobs that put them on boats and sent them far away. We tend to forget sometimes, well, you genealogists don't as much as the rest of the general population, we tend to forget that people were very mobile much farther back in our history than we often think of. Methods of death. My favorite, right? Didn't I say that? I want to know it all. Accidents, diseases, war, what happened? Well, we've covered war. We've got some accidents. Mr. Thomas Lynch, late from Ireland. Well, that's good. He was also late in Stirling because he was killed by the fall of a tree. So he got up in the morning and he had land. We're going to deduce all of this, right? He got up in the morning, he's got land. He's got to clear some land. I got to take that tree down. Thwack, it's over. Just like that. And they understood that. This certainly is fabulous to document what happened to the guy, but also, and this is actually 1820, and he's only 21 years old. They understood the idea that you could be here 1 minute and gone the next. This is one of my favorites. How many times have I said that tonight, right? So, in memory of Mr. Thomas Dale, who casually fell from Springfield Bridge December 26th and died 27/18/14 in the 30th year of his age. Casually fell from a bridge. Right? So how would you interpret that? Right. Well, it's right after Christmas, right? It's the 26th. Christmas isn't exactly what we think of today back in 1814, but it's getting there.
Christmas is a terrifying memories of what's happened.
Maybe he slipped underneath.
There you go. Casually, when you read these stones, particularly when you're getting 100 plus, 150 or more years old, the language we use today is not the same language. To casually fall means accident. It's a nice euphemism for saying we had an accident. It might be an even nicer euphemism for saying we had a jumper. You don't know. But remember two things. So the vernacular will be different, as well as when you see things that might be a typo, that you think are a typo, that word town, T-O-W-N, town, T-O-W-N-E. Oh, that's not how, that's there, you guys are funny, that's not how that's spelled. Well, it might have been how it was spelled then. We don't have real standard codified languages until well into the middle of the 1800s. Samuel was lost overboard from the U.S. steamer Nossamond on the Potomac River, April 6, 1865. He fell in service of his country. Well, April 6, 1865, on a steamer in the Potomac, I'm pretty sure you don't have to tell me, but it's nice to say, he fell in service of his country. I clearly have someone in the military here. Clearly something happened. So, what do? Go Google that boat and see what kind of historical documents it'll bring you to. I have seen them before where there's these great stories about steamers blowing up and, yeah, no, not this one. I actually couldn't find anything about this one. I didn't dig very deep, but a cursory look around led me not to this particular steamer, but to Potomac military records, a whole history about steamers and how they came to be and how they came into service in the military. So it's going to give you a baseline to start looking in other places. Poor Thaddeus. Nope, I lied. It's Phoebe. Phoebe, wife of Thaddeus, Died of the smallpox, 1824. Also, so that's January 22nd, 1824. And also, Elizabeth, Elysian. Those names crack me up. I collect names. My gravestone name is Sophronia, just like Zipporah. Died January 25th, 1821. So if I've got somebody up here at this date that died of the smallpox, and I've got a corresponding member of the family that died around the same timeline, I might be able to draw a comparison or draw a conclusion that the disease didn't get just that one, the disease got the other one.
It has the little birthday, 3 months something.
Yep, 3 months, 14 days. Yep. So you might have any number of things. You might have a mother-daughter, but you've got a sickness in the house that's taken more than one. The kind of outbreaks like smallpox, diphtheria, fevers, influenza, giant epidemics and epidemics that come through on a regular basis are very well documented, and you can read a whole history about it. And you can, when you find one in the cemetery, keep your eyes open for more. If you've got somebody else in a time frame in the 1820 to 1821, because this is January, I've got a sickness that comes through the community. Sometimes the people with these kind of diseases were buried, particularly with the smallpox, they were buried either in the cemetery or not. There is no, I've got no clear line that says the smallpox people were always buried outside the cemetery because they were so afraid. I have lots of documentation that the smallpox people were taken and sent out to the pest house, either to get over their illness and if they survive, come back into the community, and sometimes go out to the pest house never to be let back in. Because you didn't get sick because smallpox is a virus. You got sick because you were bad. Our community got sick because we were being punished by our maker for something. Disease, particularly before this time frame, we're starting to learn about vaccines as we come out of the 1700s and into the 1800s. But typically, there is a religious bent to the idea of being sick well into the beginning of the 1900s, when we start taking medicine as science rather than as art or trapping it in with religion. I've got 5 children here. Sad, I know. But childhood mortality right up through the end of the 1800s, very, very high. I've got October 9th, 1760, November 20th, December 21st. And then I have another one almost a year later, December 19th of 1761. Something happened in this house. Look around the cemetery. Do you see other large numbers of deaths in this time period? And you can always add a couple of months before and after. Did something happen within the family? Was there a fire? Was there a sickness? Did they all get food poisoning? What happened? Well, I do know a couple of things. I do know, this is in Concord, I do know that there was a large outbreak of smallpox in 1760s. This is probably what that is. There's something else here that you need to know. I've got 4 deaths in 1760. I've got another one in 1761. This stone didn't exist until at least 1761. Unlike today, where you can go out and add dates to stones, you don't do it here. You also don't lose 4 children in less than 3 months and run right out and put up a stone. You didn't expect it, you don't have the money, you're heartbroken, it's just not the time for it, for all of those factors. But when we lose another one a year later, maybe we've got some money. Maybe this doesn't go up until after 1761. Here lies buried the body of Mr. Noah Brooks, who departed this life February 18th, 1790, in the 57th year of his age. He was a virtuous, peaceable, useful member of society. His funeral was attended with this mournful circumstance that his eldest daughter, Mrs. Betty Fry, who died in a few hours after her father and was placed in the grave at the same time. So that is a good example of the use of commas. I would like some punctuation in that string. We had to sit and read that a couple of times to figure out what was going on. So at first, when you read it, the funeral was attended with this mournful circumstance. It sounds like the daughter died graveside. Then you read it again, and did the daughter get put in the same grave? So we do a little bit of reading, we add a couple of commas, we figure it out. He was ill, or he died for whatever reason. She died a few hours after, for whatever reason, at what I assume is on the same date, February 18th, 1790. She died within a few hours, and then they were buried at the same time, not in the same grave. Going with no sharing of graves. But there's a lot to chew on there. And when I did a little bit of snooping around about Mr. Noah Brooks, because my first thought was, if you're going to write it on a gravestone, that you have this kind of dual death in close proximity, that's good fodder for the newspaper, right? It's something of unusual community interest. So maybe I'll go look in the newspapers of the time period and see if anything's written about it. I did a little bit of looking on him, and this stone is in Lincoln, and he's Brooks that owned a big tavern that was still in operation into the 1800s. So they're a notable family. So that on top of tells me that this very well might have been written about. So you might get some more details in the newspapers of the time.
Bronze markers.
Markers?
The bronze markers that are on the bottom corner.
Yeah. Here?
That looks like there's two.
I've got Sons of Liberty. I got a rock. Oh, you mean, the star behind it. Possibly, yeah. That Revolutionary War. That's probably the Revolutionary War star, yeah. Yep. Yeah, and you look through those records as well. There's all kinds of information. And these things, these objects out in the cemeteries will give you the clues and the head starts and the impetus to go and look some more. I want to make sure you guys know about this. This is part of the handout that you were given. Make sure, if you haven't gotten it already, please make sure you get one. Just a bunch of stuff, and certainly not everything. Many of them are linked to other resources as well. You can find all of them on the Gravestone Girls website as well. Find a Grave, as genealogists, I'm guessing you guys know Find a Grave. Do you guys know about the Find a Grave app for your phone? Help you locate cemeteries when you're out in the field? There's an app you can download, and when you open it, GPS locates you, and it'll say, if I opened this now, it would say, you're in Chelmsford, and all these little gravestones would pop up around that show me where the cemeteries are. And then you can drill down into that map to each one of those gravestones is linked to a cemetery, may or may not have had pictures put in, may or may not have requests from Find a Grave, and then you can also drill further so that it will take you to Google Maps and give you directions on how to get there. It's a valuable resource. It's Find a Grave, and it's their mobile app for cemetery location. You guys know David Allen Lambert? Yeah, David's the one that turned me on to that. At first I was like, yeah, Find a Grave, whatever. And then I used it and I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So when I go out to do research in Massachusetts, I take David's book and I use Find a Grave, and it keeps me from wandering around all over the place going, where the hell am I going? It's a very valuable resource. So there is also one website you should know about, Grave Addiction. That's my friend Beth. She's a member of the board of the Association for Gravestone Studies. She's out in Ohio, And she's got a really good website that she built. She's a hobbyist on the side when it comes to cemeteries. And she's got a really great website that she's built with a lot of, a big long list of terms and symbols. And she's got a lot of those fraternal and social organizations, particularly that she sees out in the Midwest. There's the Association for Gravestone Studies. You guys know that one? Oh, wow, they're not doing their job, are they? So they've been around for about 40 years. The membership is everybody that has anything to do with gravestones, whether you're a hobbyist, a professional, a genealogist, a stone carver, you like symbols, you like geology, whatever it is your particular area of study, you can link that to the idea of gravestones. Through the website, you can sign up for the e-newsletter. It's a monthly e-newsletter. It's free. You don't have to be a member to take it, to be able to access it. It is created by AGS members nationwide. We have several international members as well. They just write in, they write articles, and they send pictures of what's going on in their towns, for their restoration projects, of their travels, of anything that belongs in the study of gravestones, and it's quite comprehensive. If you become a member, you have membership gets you a number of published more scholarly publications over the course of the year, and my favorite thing is we go to camp every year. Some people are fancy and call it the annual conference. All the bad kids at the back of the tour bus call it Gravestone Camp. And you can find a cemetery camp group on Facebook where members are posting pictures of all our escapades. The greatest thing about cemetery camp, it moves every year. Last year we were in Alabama.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was fabulous.
It must have been so cool.
It was. We've been in Kentucky and Indianapolis, and we were out on the West Coast in Oregon. They've been all over. I've been going for about the last 10 years. This year we are coming back home, and we are in Danbury, Connecticut. So it is always the third week of June. There's details on the website. Registration is just opened up. There are 2 days of road trips. You take bus trips if you want. There are 2 days of lectures and field work. You can take a conservation workshop. You can take a photography workshop. You can take a gravestone cutting workshop. There's a lot of stuff to do. I have met some amazing, wonderful friends by going to camp every year, as well as by virtue of camp moving every year. We learn a lot about everything I just told you and more in that particular part of the country. I'm still waiting for the big European tour, but the Farber Gravestone Collection. This is a pretty fabulous resource. So the Farbers were a married couple that were traveling around in the early 1970s taking real photographs of New England gravestones. By the time they were done, they had almost 14,000 images. They gave those images to the American Antiquarian Society, yet another fabulous resource for you genealogists, and I think I put them on there. They're next on the list. The Antiquarian Society digitized the collection, and it's available online. The fabulous thing, a number of fabulous things about it, you can sift it by town, you can sift it by state, carver, image. The one bummer about it is while I can find the town that these gravestones are in, they don't tell me what cemetery. But it certainly narrows the field, and you guys are genealogists, you'll figure it out. One of the most fabulous, the reason the collection was started by the Farbers is they were examining gravestones and studying them, trying to do carver identification, makers, particularly of colonial period stones. So there's information in there as well. One of the very best things about it is those pictures are 50 years old. Those stones, many of those stones don't look the same. Many of those stones still are no longer standing on the landscape. So it's a really great window into the past. They didn't get to every town in Massachusetts or every cemetery by far, but it is certainly a fabulous repository of information. The American Antiquarian Society, they kind of go hand in hand with New England HistGen. You guys all know New England HistGen. You know the Antiquarian Society too? So they're located in Worcester. They are all about print material. If it was printed up through, I think it's 1850 or something like that, they got it. They have an amazing collection, and it's not just newspapers and magazines and broadsides. It's photograph albums, it's pictures of gravestones, it's advertisements, it's all kinds of printed goods. They are, I believe, they are a free resource to use. I think you just have to let them know that you're coming and make an appointment to come in. You can use their resources in the stacks, and they have quite a bit of their stuff online as well. We all know New England HistGen. You all know NERC. Did you guys see me ever at NERC? I've seen you guys, some of you look familiar. No? Okay, maybe I was having margaritas that day. But the New England Regional Genealogical Consortium, a great meeting place every other year. We've got one coming up in 2019. So that's like genealogy camp, right? And then the Rhode Island Cemetery Commission, Cape Cod Gravestones, those two, by virtue of their names, one's in Rhode Island and one's for the Cape. Their cemeteries and their gravestones have been documented almost down to every cemetery and every gravestone in Rhode Island and on the Cape.
Why don't you have New Hampshire?
Okay, I can do that. Somebody invite me. Absolutely.
Vermont, Maine.
Yeah, so the other ones, the Rhode Island Cemetery one and the Cape Cod gravestones, you can drill down through those by town, and then there's an inventory of by cemetery in that town of the gravestones. And there's also, for the Rhode Island ones, there's also commentary. The Cape Cod one has commentary, has transcriptions and photographs. It's a great, great resource, and it's very easy to use, by the way. It's broken down. And then you've got VOCA, the Vermont Old Cemetery Association, and MOCA, the Maine Old Cemetery Association. These are state cemetery groups, just like the National AGS group, like-minded people. They have membership, they have newsletters, they have trips, they have speakers, they have educators, and if you have questions, they're a great resource to go for. And then certainly the last one, Connecticut Gravestone Network, works the same as MOCA and VOCA. So there's a lot of terrific resources out there that you don't even have to leave home for. You just type that stuff in and the Oracle will take you there. So my job this evening has been, look at that, I am like 4 minutes to 8:15. I'm a 8:45. I'm amazing. I'm buying the margaritas tonight. Cemeteries, my job is to tell you that the cemeteries, they're fun places, they're educational places. They're art museums, they're living history museums, they are time travel machines, they are your TARDIS to 300 or 400 years ago. They are time travel. And certainly for you genealogists, they are a super valuable resource. They're free, and you can go just about any time. I wouldn't go in the evening, they usually frown upon that. Plus it's trip hazard, so it's kind of dangerous. And you've got a really fabulous colonial burial ground right here, just by the white steeple. Over across the way, you've got your founders burying ground with stuff that goes back into the early 1700s with great art and great stories. I want to thank the Chelmsford Cultural Council and the Mass Cultural Council, and certainly I want to thank the Chelmsford Genealogical Club. You did it! For having me tonight. It's been fun. You've been fabulous. Make sure you get your propaganda. Come visit us online. All of you on Facebook and Instagram, I want my numbers up tomorrow when I look. It's my birthday month. Humor me. And please make sure you get that handout too with all the terms and resources. Thank you so much.